Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm playing chess, but captures are not allowed. My goal is to win one game against Martin. Let's get started with game number one. Alright, game number one, we're playing against Martin, and as I've already said, captures will not be allowed for the entirety of this game. So I feel like the first thing that's going to change very quickly is the manner in which we actually grab space on the board. Since all of those sort of normal chess concepts like grabbing outposts and, solidifying weak squares immediately go out the window. There's just no such thing, right? I can develop my queen, and my long-term threat can realistically be queen to e6 gives check, king moves out of the way, and queen to e7 would be checkmate since there are no captures allowed. So we'll go ahead and give that a try, queen to e6, and my queen is weirdly enough completely safe, but we are met with knight to e7. Since, as we already know, Martin never falls for mate in 1, and king to f8 followed by queen e7 or queen to e8 would have in fact been a checkmate in 1. But this brings me to the second thing that I think immediately sort of obviously comes to mind, which is that I think knights will be very overpowered, right? Because every other piece, and this is something that I actually originally learned in duck chess, where there's like a duck in between and it stops long range pieces from being able to defend as they normally would. Very much like duck chess, all of these long-range pieces, I can't believe I clicked on the king, long-range pieces like bishops and rooks and queens are heavily nerfed, right? Because the queen is sitting right here but doesn't actually do anything. Knights, on the other hand, are not nerfed. Knights can jump around as much as they please and, cause all sorts of trouble for the enemy king. So I'll go ahead and develop both knights since neither of them can be captured. Right, queen to d6 threatens absolutely nothing. I'm good to continue my plan. Weirdly enough, it does kind of cover d6 though, which is where I wanted to originally land. But f6 is still on the table, so how do I get to f6? g4, which requires e3. So what, knight d1 to e3 to g4? I suppose I could also just play h4. Looking for knight h2, knight g4 myself. So we'll start with that. Knight to g4 looks for knight to f6, which is immediately covered up, but allows queen to f7. And now queen to e8 is in fact checkmate. With that, we do defeat Martin, but let's go ahead and upgrade to his cousin, Smartin. Okay, we are now paired against Smartin, who hopefully will play a little bit smarter. We'll start with pawn to e4, and I think look for very similar ideas, right? We're just gonna throw the queen deep into the position. The knight comes out to play right away, but interestingly enough, this kind of sets up smothered mate. A knight on d6 or f6 would just immediately be checkmate. So knight to c3, I think is a very natural move here, looking for d5 and f6, or b5 and d6. Both of those I think make plenty of sense. Knight to f5 is at least 2 moves away from my king, and then I slide out of the way in any case. So I don't think I'm concerned about knight to f5. Let's continue with knight to d5. Queen to f6, a very unique way to defend, right? Because since there are no captures, neither queen f6 nor the pawn on c7 are actual concerns. The only thing that matters is that Martin or in this case, Smartin, apologies, occupies those squares, so they're not weak anymore. In which case, you'd imagine we just bring out more firepower. We'll bring this other knight into the game. Bishop to b4, I don't think sets anything up. What square am I looking for? I think I'm looking for d6, right? So let's go knight d4, looking for knight b5 and then knight d6. We're met with pawn to b5, which actually stops that exact idea. Surely I can force my way in, though. Oh, there is also this other concept that I can just place a piece, in this case, the knight specifically, right next to the enemy king. And it's kind of a good way of just holding on to the square until a different piece, the queen here is a little bit of an involved choice, but not a bad example, until a different piece can sort of take its place. Let's continue with knight to e6, and I'm going to do the same thing with this knight. I'm going to go knight to c5, total non-threat, the queen is totally fine. And then knight to d7, and I'm sort of hugging the king, a little bear hug for that black king, queen to e6. What a strange way of attacking. We are put in check, but I think I can just slide out of the way, and there shouldn't be any concerns here, right? The other knight comes out to play. Now, how do I unleash all heck on the enemy king? Maybe we go knight to f5. It's very difficult to calculate this, I'll admit, because it's very counterintuitive, but the idea here is we do threaten queen to e7, so Smartin here kind of has to play, queen to e7, knight to e7, or even the bishop back, just to occupy the space that the knight no longer controls. And then I'm looking for knight to d6. King has to move to d8. And there has to be some sort of idea there, right? Like knight c5 looking for b7. This whole operation is very involved, but I think it's sound, right? Bishop goes back. Now knight check. king to d8 was the only move. It's so funny to calculate this. Like, I'm trying to do it in my head, but my brain refuses to compute this. Knight c5 here forces bishop to b7, so that knight b7 is not a possibility. But then I threaten queen to d7. So I have this double threat, right? The knight threatens to go to b7, the queen threatens to replace the knight. And I don't think both of those are stoppable, right? Knight c5 should win on the spot. Yeah, queen shuffles over. It's funny. It realizes that there are these sort of dual checkmate situation going on, right? The knight and the queen trap the king, so knight to b7 is a checkmating threat. And then, of course, the queen herself threatens to trap the king, which is also a checkmating threat. So it kind of breaks the engine and it just plays whatever. So queen d7 here is, in fact, checkmate, and with that we do defeat Smartin. Now I'm going to introduce a new character. Now this iteration of Martin is by far the strongest that we've ever had on the channel and may ever have again, but hopefully we'll be able to give him a run for his money and in the process not have a lifelong hex placed on us. With that, let's go ahead and start with pawn to e4. I'm going to go with the same sort of vague idea of just kind of throwing my pieces in the general direction of the enemy king. You know, activate the queen, get her nice and close, activate the knights. Certainly some of the key squares will be d6 and f6, so maybe I'll optimize for that a little bit, but let's get that queen out there since she covers a lot of space. We do get knight to d4, I guess looking for knight to f3. I'll just shove the king over to d1, so I don't think I care about this whatsoever. Let's develop knight c3, because this knight does have a very clear line of sight. d5 to f6 is immediately threatening checkmate. We do get knight to f3. If I shove the king over to d1, should be totally fine. Yeah, knight to e5 is a complete non-threat. That queen is not hanging since there are no captures. But knight to d5 is a threat, looking for f6, which would be checkmate. Does allow knight to f6, which I don't think seems right. King to e7, is it comfortable here? I'm going to do my best to make it uncomfortable instantly. Knight to f3, looks for knight d4, knight f5. We're met with knight c4. The problem is the singular knight. There's no way the singular knight could possibly challenge my king, right? Knight to e3 check, even king to e2. Placing the king directly orthogonal to the knight means there are many moves left before that knight can even put me in danger again. So I really don't care whatsoever. Knight d4 actually threatens checkmate in one move. With knight to f5, we cover e7 and d6. So the only move the bot had was king to d6. That's not going to stop me whatsoever. Knight to f5 does give check, force the king to slide over to c6. Now, how do I make its life even more complicated? Knight to e7 gives check. King comes up to c5, pawn to b4. I feel very confident that there must be a series of checks here that eventually lead to checkmate. Just check again. King comes up to a5. Knight c6 forces the king back to b6. There was literally no other move. Pawn to a5 forces the king out to c5. d4. King goes back to d6, and e5 is, in fact, checkmate. I thought this bot was going to be much stronger, to be honest. And it was. It did hold on technically for many more moves than Smartin or Martin, but wasn't nearly as bad as I thought. In fact, I'm going to give it a rematch. All right, we've offered this cursed being a rematch. Let's go pawn to e4. We'll play into a similar idea. I think this time, however, I'm just going to go for the knight attack immediately. We are threatened with knight to d3 and f3. There's no way I can cover both, but I did like the idea of moving the queen out of the way because after either check, king shuffles over to d1, and first of all, the bot cannot target me from b2, c3, or f2, and second of all, either square would be one square adjacent to e3, which means it takes at least 3 turns for that knight to go from d3 or f3 into that middle square. So let's just get the queen out of the way. We are put in check. King to d2 should be totally fine. Knight goes back. Knight d5. I think it's just going to fall for the exact same trick. Okay, knight to f6. Bring this knight out. Oh, queen shuffles over. That's interesting. What's the idea? Knight d4, if knight f5, king goes back. And it's tucked away rather nicely there. And if knight d4, knight c6, that's an issue, but we might be met with c6 or even knight c6. Truth is, ultimately, all of those would be defensive moves, so I think I'm completely in the right to just continue the attack here. Knight to f3, I could not care less. Knight c6 check, draws the king out. Isn't this just checkmate? Okay, we absolutely spanked this bot. This bot did not give us a challenge whatsoever. If you guys did enjoy this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Let me know down below what other fancy variants I should cook up and try against Martin, and I'll see you guys in the next one.